Okay, so with the cloak done, I'd like to paint this part. I don't know what you call it. Head feathers, head fluff. And I maybe should have done it at the same time as the other blues, but I wasn't sure at the time how I wanted to go about it. You can see I've done a couple brush strokes deciding on colours. And I think I want to keep it blue, but a different tone of blue. And I want it to get lighter towards the centre and probably a different hue. So we're going to start off with the same colours, but then I want to mix in some kind of maybe violet-ish colour. After that, I'd like to do the little gems, and we'll do that at the same time as this big one on the shoulder, and just kind of working down. Then we'll do the silver on the swords and the scale mail, and then it will feel almost done with just the base to go. So I started off with, or I'm going to start off, haven't done it yet, with the Canterbury blue mixed in with the Berrying blue. And what we need to do first of all is all of the parts of this that face up, we just need to block them out. So the first thing is to separate, the angles facing down, the shadow, and then the mid-tone, and then we'll work on the blending. I'm not going to blend the shadow parts, they'll just stay this dark base coat colour, the same base coat as the cloak. And then we'll work from there. So I'm taking a mix of the Canterbury and the Berrying blue, and you can see that faces up. I'm just going to paint the top of it and work my way across. You can see already just separating those things looks great. I tried some more vibrant blues and they just didn't work for me. So I've finished one side completely, and I wanted to just show you what a difference it makes from the base coat. I mean, obviously it would make a difference, we've highlighted it, but you can see just separating out the strands and the shadows is a really good start. And I'll obviously go ahead and do the other one, and then what we'll do is we'll just add lighter colours and then we'll build it this way. So it's kind of like first organise the light and shadow and then do the blend in that way with this, and I think it will look really cool. But I like using the Berrying blue again because like I said, it's desaturated, and I just think that works when you've got this white, blue and gold scheme. It's pretty strong colours, and having a bright blue is could be a bit much potentially as well. Okay, with all that picked out, I want to start adding some light towards the head. And I want to add like a purplish tone, just so it's varied from the cloak, a different kind of blue. I'm going to use Orchid Light, and this is a paint by Vallejo that Nocturna designed, and it's quite difficult to get hold of. I like it. It's really similar to the lilac colour. This has maybe got a tiny bit more blue in it. So I do love this one, but it's tricky to get hold of, so I feel bad for using it in tutorials, but this is close, or just any kind of violet-ish colour will be great. So start with a very, very thin line at the top, and then you almost want to compress your bristles more so it gets thicker at the bottom. And that's so it kind of helps with the blending. There's such small areas, we're not going to like glaze or wet blend these things. But if it starts really, really thin and then gets wider, it will help blend it in. And you can do this either way, brushstroke down or brushstroke up, whichever you're most comfortable with. These are so skinny, these lines, that it's just however we can do it with comfort. That's going to look cool. You can see it's starting to get light around here. So I'll carry on with that. Now we're starting to get that fade. I can tell this is going to be a really cool look. So I want quite a strong colour down the bottom eventually. So basically just add a bit more of the lilac and move the brush further down and just keep highlighting really. So that was a big mistake I just made there. I'll do it all and then I'll go in with the shadow colour and then I can sharpen up any areas. I make loads of mistakes. I'm not the neatest, most perfect painter, but I kind of get the paint on there, and I find it easier to correct stuff than to absolutely nail it the first time every time, you know. But that's standing out like a sore thumb to me right now. I try and leave most of my mistakes off camera. But that's nice, the purple's coming through. I think that's starting to look pretty cool. Definitely to bump up the contrast just in this last little bit. So I'm thinking it's going to be, yeah, probably 2 more highlights just to get the brightness. And I'm going to switch to the GW Lilac now. So that's what I mean. You don't need to get hold of that one that I'm using. And yeah, we'll just try and do this last little bit. So I've mixed in with my previous mix, and then I'll try it on its own as well. It's a fair bit lighter than the Orchid Light, so Orchid Light got to a point where it wasn't making it any brighter. So now I'll try the Lilac Pure at the very bottom. That's cool. So I'm going to do that to all of it, and then we'll see if it's bright enough. Okay, I know this isn't going to be anyone's cup of tea, but I love this fade blue to violet. And if we look back, it's just nice having the lighter colour towards the head. It's really cool. Wow, there you go. Not very grim dark, but it's very me, so I like that. Perhaps it could be blended a little better, like maybe I added a little too much of the violet in there, but yeah, I think it's nice. Really, really cool. So we're going to base coat the gems with this light purple colour, sunset purple mixed with a little lilac, just so it's not so deep, so we don't want a dark shadow on this base. Then we just add in some more lilac, and we're going to paint a big area up on the top right, and then we're going to do like a little reflection on the bottom. And then we'll just paint around and link that up. So we have that nice line running around it to frame it. And now we can just concentrate on lightening up this bit. So we'll use the pure Orchid Light now and cover most of this, just leaving a thin band. Because I want to go quite pale on this. Then we're going to start adding in, unusually, the highlight skin. Same thing we used to highlight the white. And that's my observation from the artwork, is on these kind of pearls, it's very bleached out and desaturated, so I'm hoping adding that in gives it nice contrast, but yeah, it gives that kind of bleached out look. So I'll just start making the highlight too small, and once that's dry, just get the size right. And then on the little guys, we're just doing little dots at the top. Much easier on the small ones. And yeah, I didn't think that would work, but I really like it. And yeah, so it's not something I maybe would have chosen, but looking at the artwork and rolling with it seems to have paid off. So adding some more of that colour. And much smaller this time. That gives it quite a nice shiny look. So just turning the model back, seeing what that looks like. I quite like it because it's kind of shiny and it's got that pearl gem kind of look, but it's not a crazy contrasting colour. I think with the little bit of lilac around here and having the gems there, yeah, not a crazy contrast, but I do like it, and it follows the artwork. So yeah, quite happy with that. I finished it off actually with a highlight of pure skin on its own, just a little bit to see what it looked like, and yeah, really nice. So happy with that element, and that recipe I definitely think I will roll out for the army too, because it's quite quick and I could batch paint all the little gems on a unit in not too much time at all. Maybe that shadow's a bit dark, a bit too purple, but that's being fussy. I think it's cool. The little ones, they look nicer actually. They're easier to do. So at this point I'm feeling he looks pretty cool. I'm going to go on to the metallics now. So swords in silver and the scales too. And we've got this like flame in the middle. And honestly, I was really torn whether to do like a sort of power weapon effect where we blended all the weapons and stuff like that, which is my go-to. But we've done true metallics on here. And I thought, maybe it'd be nicer to do it real silver. But actually, I think the compromise is we're going to do it in real silver, but then we'll do matte blue, like a flame effect for the runes. So we'll start with the metallics, and then we'll paint these up later. And then for the scales, I'll paint those up silver, and I'm thinking about playing with some coloured washes or something just to tint those and then make them more interesting. For metallics, as we did with the gold, you can put them on the wet palette. I've got the dry palette here. And I'm going to base in black metal, which is a scale 75 paint I haven't used for years. I actually found a brand new bottle of it. So I thought, let's give it a go. And I'm going to add 1 drop of water just to help it flow. And we'll just base coat this real smooth. I think with my gold, because I hadn't used metallics in a while, I painted them on a little bit thick. So with the silver, I'm going to pay more attention to my dilution and just do 1 thin coat, let it dry and come back for another one if I need it. And with the sword, just going to like do 1 smooth stroke of paint. So really, really not messing with the paint at all. And you can kind of use the side of the brush and you won't catch that middle flame detail. And that'll be easier to see where we're going, I think, when we paint the effect. I haven't used this paint in years. I used to use it all the time, I think on my Ultramarines army, and it's amazing. It's a new pot, so yeah, it might be slightly different, but it's just got such a clean finish. It's dried really nice and smooth, and it's kind of slightly matte, which is perfect for the shadows. So what I want to do now is start adding in some Stormhost silver. I quite like this paint from GW. There's loads of other good silvers out there. Doesn't matter too much really, whichever one you've got that's nice and bright. And I'm just going to start adding that in, I think. A bit more. And then definitely some water to help it flow. I tried out the Scale 75 lighter silver. It's called Heavy Metal, and it was just really thin, so I might have a bad copy. I stuck it in my Vortex mixer, and it still wasn't really great, so yeah, I just grabbed my Stormhost silver. And there's some Pro Acryl ones as well. You know, I raved about the Pro Acryl for the gold. I'm going to use a light one for the silver, but I don't mind Stormhost silver. So what we're going to do is try and build up the highlights on the sword. So I'm going to paint all of this side lighter. This side is like, yeah, it's going to be the highlight side. And then on the darker one, I'm just gonna lighten up this one little bit, and then a little bit at the bottom. And then on this blade, you can see where that's just one color right now, but where the light's hitting it, because it's a metallic, it's bouncing. But this is actually the effect we're trying to exaggerate, so one side light and then one side dark. So we will paint all of this side. And then on the dark, I'll just lighten up one little bit. So I would ignore that last clip, because I don't know if you can see, Stormhose Silver's okay, but it's a little bit grainy in comparison to the super smooth black metal. So I've managed to go and find some Pro Acryl Silver, and then I've popped it here in the Drywell palette. It's very, very light, but you can see it's got no grain in. It's really smooth. And then this is the Stormhose Silver, which is separated like mad, and it's going all gloopy really fast. So I'm going to switch to the wet palette, just hopefully keeps it working a bit longer. And yeah, I think I'll do a new mix with this silver, which looks lovely, with the black metal, and we'll see if we get some better results. I really don't know if you're going to be able to tell any difference on the camera of the quality of these metallics, but for me it was absolutely night and day. The silver from Pro Acryl was smoother, it was more opaque, it didn't separate so bad, it's just a nicer paint to use, and it looks better on. So I think that these two will become my go-tos for silver, and you can see between the two of them there's a crazy amount of contrast, so it's a bit of a pain to do mixes every time. I'll try and find a medium silver that I love, but for this figure this was absolutely fine. So I think I will finish with a pure highlight of that lovely silver, and it's rather bright, so got a reasonable amount of water with it, and I'm just going to focus now on the end of this sword. But it just goes on so nicely. So I'm going to let that dry and maybe come back to it. The scales, what I've done is I've just started highlighting the top ones. So this one here you can see is a touch darker, and I'll put this brighter silver just on the very top row. So that just brings your eye up into the light quite nicely. Top ones there. It's really quick as well, just adding these layers. And on this part, I think I'll just do like the top ones, and then just on kind of one side as well. Do find that metallics don't last that long on the palette. I like them pretty fresh out of the pot, then they work nicer in my opinion. But that is so smooth. I think you can't really tell until you're pushing the pigments around yourself really, but that to me looks wonderful. Nice bright silver. And then we'll side brush the edges. Very simple, but I don't get on with metallics that well. I don't do them very often, and I'm very fussy. But I have to say, I'm very happy with the results and these paints. And yeah, it's a joy to paint metallics when you're working with quality products. Painting with gloopy, horrible paints just makes them look bad, and I think that's what's put me off in the past. But yeah, I'm really happy with the silver and the gold recipes, so I'm looking forward to using those products moving forward on the army, hopefully. So with the silver finished, you see quite a simple job on the silver. We've just got this light on one side and then the shadow on the other. Now we're going to do a kind of glow effect on this flame. I was thinking orange would be cool, and obviously it's a strong contrast against the blue, but I don't think I want that strong contrast. I'm actually going to go for a turquoise. So it's a slightly different blue, but still in that blue range. I'm going to use AK Aquatic Turquoise. Sotek Green from Citadel would also be fine. Any turquoise you like, really. The main thing is that we're going to dilute it quite a lot, and we're going to start off by washing it into this. And because it's nice and thin, it will just flow really nicely. And it means you don't have to be as accurate as painting it in thick. In my test, I painted the whole sword silver. So obviously I've left it black, but you can actually paint the whole thing silver, and obviously the blue will go over the top of the silver, and that works really well too. For this, I wanted it to go over the black, because then it will contrast a little bit more, just because we've got a matte base. It will be really matte compared to the rest. There's still a little bit of the sheen shines through. And I've already done the same on that rune. I just tested it out. So yeah, just washing it in. And we'll let this first layer dry and see what it looks like. You might find it takes a couple of coats of that wash, because obviously you're diluting the paint so that it flows nicely. But over the black, yeah, like I said, you'll need a couple coats. Once you've got it opaque like this, I'm actually going to add some ivory into the turquoise. I'm not using a brighter blue, because I want it to go to white, like it's burning hot, and desaturate it. If it's too vibrant, it'll overpower the figure. If it's more a vibrant blue than the blue in the center, you can already see it's quite bright as it is. So I'm going to add some ivory, and then we're going to try our best to just paint the center, which is quite tricky. So just run the brush along the middle. If you make a mistake, you can just run that previous wash in, and it will just kind of hide it. Almost like a glaze, really, so you can kind of knock back your mistake, but try and just get your line as fine as possible. So I'm using a size 0 here. It's got a nice point, and I can just run that down the center. And the symbol too. So that looks pretty good. I did the best job I could of getting it down the center. You can add some more ivory if you want it neater. I feel like it needs a little more contrast. So what I'm going to do is try a wash again. Try and just get the edges to recess. And I'm going to make it a little bit darker by adding some Despair Green or Huldra Blue from Scale 75. Basically just any darker turquoise. And I'll start trying to get that into the recesses. It should flow in there anyway, but we'll just try and put it in the right place. I'm going to actually thin mine down a little more. Too much on the brush there, but that's fine. Okay, let's let that dry. So that worked because we've got more contrast now. I did neaten it up with the highlight color again, and it was actually easier to see where I was going. So yeah, the result is much nicer. Actually, I think I need to tidy up the silver where I've got some of that dark wash. It's not quite working for me. So what I'll do is just take the silver and just sharpen up all of this. So on this side, I'll use the Pro Acryl silver, and on the shadow side, I'll neaten up with the black metal. Very, very simple effect, but I think just try and do it cleanly. So, sometimes simple but neat as you can is the way to go. Such a small, you know, such a narrow thing, we can't do anything too complex with it. So as long as we've got nice definition, you can see we've got that dark blue line around it now, and then the bright blue in the middle. I think that's enough. I could push and have more whites and brighter blue, but actually I really don't want to detract from the model. For me, that works. It's borderline drawing attention because it is probably a little more vibrant than these blues. But overall, yeah, I think that's cool. So we're almost finished now, and I just want to point out a few things that I've done. I played around with adding some colours into the scales. In a lot of the artwork, they've got all these different colours. I tried using contrast paints, which works really well over metallics. In the end, I painted it back over with the neutral silver, and I think that's because it's kind of got enough going on. When I added other colours, even colours already present, like bits of blue, bits of lilac, it just felt a bit too busy with colour. And it's really important to have areas of relief where it's kind of plain. And actually, I think just having the darker scales at the bottom in the black metal and having the light at the top is enough. I think it's got enough colour and variation. It looks cool. So I just felt it didn't need anything else. And makes it really simple. So for the troops, that would be great. And then I also had left these two items, this kind of, I don't know, brooch or something. And I was thinking, oh, maybe that phoenix could be glowing or something. But again, I thought that's going to be too much. So I've just painted it exactly the same as the white armour with the Warp Fiend grey this time. And I think that's cool, just leaving the phoenix in plain black. Again, very simple. But I like it. It doesn't detract too much. It just works really nicely. At the end of the day, the main features are this head crest now. This is kind of the most eye-catching thing, which is on the face, and I think that's right. And we have cool things like this gem, which I'm super happy with how that's turned out. I also painted the little kind of crystal in the sword the same way as that gem. So now we've got this nice overall palette, and yeah, I think it looks really great now, and we don't need any more colours and things like that. The last thing to do on the figure before the base is we're going to start with this leather, and what I've done is painted that in Rhinox hide, and then I've given it an ultra matte varnish with the brush, just painted that over the top, and then that really contrasts to the metallics next to it, which is cool. So I'll begin highlighting that shortly. The other thing with the colour as well, just before we move on to that leather, is with the base we're going to have a lot of green. So that's why we don't want too many colours on here, because we are going to get additional colours from the base. So yeah, I'm happy with that. Sorry if you wish you painted that at the same time as the white armour, but it didn't take too long at all. So yep, let's move on, finish it up with the leather. So I'm going to highlight this leather with some Scale 75 Dubai Brown, and we're going to paint the volume first. So basically the end of this part is going to get a wide highlight, and if you look at the gold where I've placed that highlight there, we're just matching with that. And I've diluted it quite a lot, so take just a couple thin layers. And then we'll also pick out all of these edges, but only the edges facing the light direction. So this side here, but then not that one. If we do them both, it will look a bit busy, but if we just do the edges on that, it will help sell our kind of light source. So to soften that line, I'm just going to make a glaze with the Rhinox hide, and just starting a little bit over the line, I'm going to move that glaze across. And I don't want a perfect blend, I want it to be quite abrupt as it's leather, just where the light's catching it. But this will just soften it a little bit and make it nicer. And the same here, we'll just push up into the shadow on that horizontal strap. That's kind of dry already here. do another little one. And if you make a mistake doing this glaze, you can just layer the other brown, pushing it that way, and then you'll get a nice blend. But you can see just those couple glazes, it's actually softened it quite nicely. What I'll do is I'll just do another layer, pushing that way. Now again will help to blend it before we move on. I've added a little highlight skin, and only really because it's on the palette. We just need it to be a tiny bit lighter, so it doesn't really matter what you add to it. As it's leather, I want this to be non-reflective, so we just have to put soft highlights on it and not go very bright. If I wanted to take it a lot brighter, I probably wouldn't use the skin colour because it will just desaturate it so fast. Use like an orange or something, or a sunny skin tone. But just for this one last little extra highlight, it's fine. It's particularly useful for the straps where you just want a little sharp highlight along the top. So there we go, a very simple leather process, which is great because I have to remember this is going to be for the army, and I want to use this same recipe for everything in the army, so it's important it's simple, but it's good enough for this character. We just have to do it with care, nice and clean, and it will look great. But that brown is sitting really nicely with the soft light against the sort of the more vibrant blue, and obviously it's contrasting lovely to the gold details. So I think just looking at it overall, just having this simple brown sits with everything really nicely. And then we turn to the front. It's not too jarring at all. You can see you just got the little straps, and then the handles I've done in the same brown. And actually that is the figure complete, and I really like that palette overall. I think I like the back the most just because the cloak's awesome in that vibrant blue. And I'm really happy with the metallics, which was, yeah, I'm not as confident with metallics as I am with non-metallics, so it's great to achieve this. You can see just having little bits of shading in the leather there, a little bit of shading in the metallics, all these little things look really great, and I'm looking forward to bringing that across the whole army too. So all that's left to do is do the base. What I'm going to do is take it off this cork now, and then we'll glue this to the 50mm gaming base. So that's him on his gaming base, and I've just put some sand on the bottom. You can see why I wanted to paint him off the gaming base, because there's so much real estate around this, it's kind of hard to get to stuff. So yeah, I'm happy I've done it this way. What I'm going to do is just base coat everything on the base with Scale 75 Gobi Brown. And that's just going to be a nice place to go from for both the earth and the rock. They're both going to be different colours, but I think that's a nice base to start with. And also because it's a Scale 75 paint, it's very matte, and that's a nice foundation for, again, rock and the earth. So we're going to do it reasonably diluted, because that'll flow so easily into the sand. And then maybe a little bit thicker paint for the base, but we're just going to put a couple coats of this on. So with the Gobi Brown dry, you can see it's a really solid base for both the earth and the stone. And what we're going to do is make the earth darker and the stone lighter. So I'm going to start with the earth because that's definitely going to be the messy bit. Now one of the issues is I've painted over sand, which is pale, and then I painted over the black primed part, so these don't really match right now. So what I'm going to do is actually dry brush both, and then I'll put a wash over both and they'll match. But when I do the army, they'll all be from black, so it'll all be the same. This is just a little situational thing with this figure. So I guess strictly I don't tend to do pure dry brushing. I think some people call this overbrushing, but I actually take paint from the wet palette, so it's diluted a little bit, and I have some loaded on the brush, and I'm going to check there's not loads on the end. But then what I'm going to do is really carefully rub it over the top. So normally with dry brushing, I guess we're a bit more aggressive, but what I like to do is use this diluted paint and caress the sand just carefully. And the reason I do that is because we don't get that dry, chalky appearance. We're just carefully catching the tops. And actually I can use, this is an old brush, so I wouldn't do it with my best new one, but it's nowhere near as harsh on the brush, as you can see. And I think you get a nicer result on the sand. It is definitely more time consuming, but this is like, you know, how can we make our characters look better? We know that dry brushing's the right technique for this job, but maybe we just be a bit more careful. Shall we call it dry caressing? Will that catch on? I don't know if it will. I'm actually going to do a little bit on this rock. See, I think that's a bit too yellow for the rock, and I would like it to be a different colour. But you could do the rock with this sandy dust as well. So I'm only just going back to the palette now to load up the brush again and just take most of it off. What you can do as well is the first few strokes you're really soft because you have more paint loaded in the brush, and then as you sort of start to use more of that paint, then you can be a bit more aggressive and push the bristles down. But you can see, hopefully, we're just carefully catching this. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. Is this overbrushing? Would you call this dry brushing? I don't know. I just know we're catching the tops of the sand and we're trying to do it in a nice, careful way. I mean, that looks really great along there, and the paint's not all dry and chalky looking because it's all diluted. So that looks really good, almost a perfect recipe for like a deserty base. Gobi brown, sandy dust, done. But this I want to be a bit more earthy because I want there to be a big difference between the rock and stuff. So what I'm going to do is dilute some Rhinox hide down, really thin, probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 parts water. And it's kind of like a wash, but it will behave like a glaze because it will just knock everything back. And this also combats that dry look from dry brushing. So you really do want a lot of water with this. If you put it on and it's too strong like that, add some more water to your brush and you can kind of dilute it. The only thing you've got to be careful with this is reactivating the PVA. I've done that before where I've done a load of washes and the PVA's kind of come back to life. So this will get quite a lot of the brown. In fact, I might even do a light wash on the rock. Start to get some definition maybe around these parts. But just a very light one. Be good for these little letters and stuff. So you can see I'm being quite careful with my washing. A bit like the dry brushing really, just nice and careful and selective. Okay, when that's dry, the earth is looking pretty good. It's hard to tell because there's a lot of mess with the rock and stuff. It's a bit half done. So I want to get the rock done. The little wash is quite nice, a little bit of earthy brown running in the recesses. So I'd like to use Karak stone from Citadel, but I have run out. So I'm going to use some birch from Scale 75. They're both great. They're just very boring kind of earthy colours like bones. Karak stone's really nice because it's quite subdued in comparison to something like Ushabti bone, which has got a lot of yellow and a lot of power in. So it's one I like to use, and it says stone in the name, so it probably works. I'm going to start with a mix of my birch and gobi brown, and I'm going to cover a lot of this. So I'm going to pay attention to the light source with this rock and try and just catch the surfaces facing my chosen light direction. So this is quite a time-consuming way of doing the rocks. You might prefer to just paint the whole thing this colour and then, you know, wash the gobi brown in and stuff. I don't mind taking my time for this because it's a character. So for me, I think it's worth it. Okay, so I'm liking the colour of this. You can see I've covered most of it. Now we're going to add some more birch or Karak stone, and we're going to continue this, but like I said, exaggerate the light source a lot more. So when we're looking at the figure like this top surface, which is horizontal, is going to probably get the most light, as well as these areas here. So I'm saying my light source comes from here. So you just got to find all the surfaces where we think the light's going to catch the most. This part is almost done. I might highlight some of the details, but this should be covered a little bit. So I want to try and make this a bit lighter. So I've not gone to pure birch. It's still a mix with more birch added to it. I think if I was using Karak stone, I would build up to using pure Karak stone. But with the birch, it's very pale, so I don't know if I'll go all the way. But we'll just keep going until we think it looks good. So you can see I'm pretty much hitting all of this top surface. And I'm just going to leave some of the cracks and stuff for nice definition. And then I will catch this part. And leave that little bit of shadow. That'll look nice later. Then this one here, that'll be lighter. These are kind of covered by that, so I think I'll lighten that one up, but then not that slope. It's quite tricky, but also fun to work out. And you can always change it if something's not working. Let's get that light in there in the bottom. And I will build these parts up. So this is where now I think I'll leave that part. Just looking at it, yeah, it's nice having that difference between those two surfaces. It doesn't have to be loads of contrast because it's a non-reflective matte element, you know, it's made of stone or whatever, but it's still nice to have some good light on it. So I think I'll do a little bit of rendering here just by doing some textured brush strokes. Wait for that to dry and build that up, but so it drops to darker here, and then pick out some of these details. Just a little bit of light. So taking a step back, hopefully we're starting to get a nice overall look for this rock. We can see we're starting to get some light cast in specific areas, and it's getting dark around here, a little bit of shadow here, and I'll just add some more birch. I mean, I'm almost at pure birch now, and I'll definitely start to be more selective of where this light goes. So we'll start with the brightest area. Okay, that looks really bright, but let's let it dry and see what it looks like. Sometimes with these scale paints, they're so matte. When they dry, they're actually quite dull. I'll carry on anyway and hope for the best. It's definitely a time-consuming way of doing it, and I think you get to things like the base and rocks and you're like, oh, I'll just do it quick. But if you spent all that time on the mini, then surely the rocks deserve the same treatment. mean, when it's the last thing you do, like this, then I'm often kind of like, oh, I just want to get it done now. So it's tempting just to rush it. But the base does add such another level of colour and interest, so should tie it all together. I'm actually mostly excited for putting on the little grass tufts. I think that's always fun. So I'll pick out some of the details here. You can also add some texture if you want. And yeah, when it's drying, it's not too overpowering. I'll actually do a little second layer because it's not very opaque. I'd love to get the airbrush on this rock because we could just spray the shadow from one side and that would make it fast, but I can't really do that. I'll definitely hit the model in some way. Sometimes you can get away with it, but I don't think I will on this. Okay, so I am happy with how it's looking. However, I did make an error in my process. It was just taking too long, so I can't advise you take exactly the same path as me. The Gobi Brown was fine for a base coat for everything, but then I should have base coated all the rock again with something lighter and just given it a wash, because it's just been too long to try and get up to this point. And actually I probably could have done with using some other paints. I'm going to list a description of paints that I advise to do, and basically I'd love to have used Steel Legion Drab from Citadel, then the Carrack Stone as I've said, and then the birch paint, because doing the mixes with Gobi Brown and birch was fine, but it's difficult to be accurate because they're so far apart, and it's just taken me a long time to build up to this point. So although I like it, yeah, a bit too time consuming even for a character, but when I do the rest of the Lumineth, then those are the colours I'm going to use, and I'll do that. But yeah, check the description of the video and I will list a process. But what I'm going to do now is use some pure birch on its own and add some final lights. It probably took me about 40 minutes of layering to get to this point, honestly. So yeah, just a little bit too much, I think. But now we're nearly there. But to be honest, that's been one of the cool things about doing this mini is, you know, I don't mind spending the time on it because it's a character and I'm just making all the recipes and they'll all work for the army. So if I tweak stuff on this model, it means when I get to the army, it's going to be a lot more efficient. And I'd rather experiment on one model as opposed to 20 spearmen or something. So the only reason I'm not using those paints I've suggested is because I don't have them, and I need to make a video and I want to paint this model, so I'm just making do. But I'm going to order some Carrack Stone and some Steel Legion Drab that I ran out of a few weeks back, and I don't need much of an excuse to buy new paint, and I'll have to put some models in that order as well, I guess. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that kind of thinking. So yeah, I'm just adding this pure birch highlight now, which is quite pale, but that's the look I want to go for. So this sort of tone I've got on there now, that mix of Gobi and birch, that's what I should have kind of gone with to start with, then given it a wash, and that would have saved me a bunch of time. Okay, so I have finally finished painting these rocks, and it took me absolutely forever, and that's because I made some mistakes with the recipe. Well, not necessarily the recipe, but maybe the process. Also the birch, I have to say, I love the colour and I love how matte it is, and I've used the paint a lot, as you can see from the label, but more for like highlights on skulls and smaller things. Whether to cover a large area like that, I don't think it was very user friendly, so I'd probably switch that out for, well, like I said, the Karak stone from Citadel, which I don't have, and I'm definitely ordering some, or something like deck tan, ivory that we use all the time. So yeah, I managed to get a result I like, but the process was difficult because of the paints I used, so I can't recommend those. So in the description I'm going to put what I propose would be an easier recipe and process. And I also, I think I base coated it too dark. The Gobi Brown was a great base coat for the sand and the rock, but then I think I should have painted the whole thing a bit lighter with something like Steel Legion Drab, which is a great paint from Citadel, and then started highlighting from that, and I think it would have been a whole lot easier. I actually, the back here, I painted with some different paints, like using ivory, and it was way easier to build it up and get it crisper and stuff. So yeah, just a little bit of a change, so I just wouldn't do exactly what I've done. But all the lessons are the same in terms of painting the light and building it up, and I am really happy with the look I've got. I'm looking forward to trying this again with some other paints, and when I do the next Lumen F tutorials, then I will certainly talk about that and come up with an easier process. But I like the pale colour, and it's something I usually shy away from. When I do rocks and bases, they always end up quite dark, and this I wanted to be pale, so I'm glad I've managed to do that and get over that sort of thing. So I've also painted the little grassy bits. I didn't record that because it was so simple. I just base coated them with Deathweld Forest, which was lovely, went on really easy, and then highlighted with this khaki. So a little greener. I mean, I know it's supposed to look like maybe wheat, which could be yellow, but I quite like the green tone of it. But yeah, going back to the rocks, it's been an interesting model, and I think I'll talk about that at the end. But just little things like this, learning what paints are hard to use is really important when you're doing like an army. And if I was doing this as a one-off, then actually I wouldn't care about changing it, because yeah, it just doesn't matter, it's done now. But I'm going to have to recreate this on the rest of the army, so I need to get that recipe right. But now we're going to do some fun stuff, because we're going to finish the model by sticking loads of grass on, and it should look really cool. So at the start of this project, I managed to buy loads of this gamer's grass, and I bought everything they do because I really wanted to find the perfect grass for this army, and I thought I'd try them all out and pick the one I like the most, and then order some more for the army. But the quality looks really good. This is the one I'm kind of leaning towards because it's got a two-tone. I'll take them out of the packet in a second. And it looks really natural. They're also really matte, which I love, because I used to ultra matte or just matte varnish my tufts because they're a bit glossy. But these look pretty damn good. So yeah, I'm excited to try these. They look really nice quality. I think the quality's improved because I saw the early ones they used to make, and these seem much better, and I'm pretty fussy about my tufts and grass products, so I'm going to pull most of these out of the packets, and we'll stick some on. These look really nice, and then there's different colours in this set. I'm not keen on the flowers. I mean, they're great quality, but I don't really want yellow flowers, so I think I'll put those away. But these ones for sure. These are getting used. These may be a bit dark. That's quite a nice bit of variation. And I'll grab one of the other packs. So the Green Meadow set looks cool. It's funny because I normally just put one or two tufts on my figures. No, this is the ones I liked, hiding underneath. These look really good. A bit pale there. Oh, super green ones. Yeah, I'm liking the look of this. And then I've got like a final set, which is like a wintry one. And I don't think I want any of these ones. They're just a bit dark. These are lovely actually. I was tempted to use these, but I always do really boring ones. I think that's the same as that, which is cool. So I've doubled up on the ones I like the most. Excellent. These are really natural looking, you can see a bit darker. So I think I'll write down the specific ones, because on the back we have the set. So I think mixed green 6mm is the one, so I'm going to have to order a bunch of those. So I'm just going to stick some of these on, check I like the colour. Normally I super glue these on, but it looks like the adhesive's pretty good on this brand. But I'd never super glue them on to start with, because you've got to check you like the colour. So the good thing is these are a little bit different in colour. So we can have some variation, but they're not miles apart. And like I said, I normally shy away from putting a lot of tufts on, but with this army and this model, I want to really go for it, like almost cover it, as if they're on highland fields. As you can see, I fully went for it, and I've put a lot of tufts on. Almost covering it, which is actually what I wanted. Maybe you don't like the look of it, which I totally get, but this is what I had in mind, and I'm actually more happy than I thought I would be. I really like it. Like I said, I'm often quite reserved with things like tufts and bases and how I like painting things, so I feel like I've achieved that, which seems easy, but I really love how these tufts make this kind of rock look. And that was something I struggled with, as you've seen in this video. But yeah, they really work well, and the green sets off the other colours so well. As a look for the figure, yeah, I'm really happy, because this was trying to, you know, set the tone for the entire army, and it's actually made me really excited to paint the rest of the army. I kind of felt guilty for starting with a character, because that feels like a kind of cop-out. It should be starting with the troops or something, but actually it's been really useful, because I was able to take my time with it, and when colours I didn't like sort of came up, I just took the time to change them and find the right thing. Some things were really successful, like the blue for the cloak. That kind of went well straight away, and the metallics too, which is cool, because the metallics was something I really wasn't sure on, and the key for that was finding those great brands, the Pro Acryl. Other things that didn't go so right were the white armour, but that just took a little bit of experimenting, and the key really was actually buying this Warp Fiend Grey, because when I tried the white armour with purple shading before, I used Slanesh Grey and it just didn't work out. This one is just a little darker, a little less saturated, and it was just right for the shadows, so switching to that was spot on. And just that little brooch I painted sort of from the ground up, rather than adding the Warp Fiend in at the end, and it worked out great. As did things like the silver sword. I was happy with all of those things. So yeah, I know in these videos I've kind of changed stuff and you know, changed things halfway through, but what I'm going to do is a video where I paint a spearman, and I'll kind of adapt it slightly more for tabletop, so I'll probably airbrush the white and paint it a little simply, but I want it to be the same kind of level as this, and that will have a summary of all the recipes and just all the processes, so hopefully if you like what I've done with this, then you can see that on these guys. As always, I'd love to hear your feedback, just if you like the result, if you like the base, and all those kind of things. In the end, I'm really happy.